the allegorical Jacob's ladder, the chrism, the rising of the oil inside oneself. Now, you can easily go on YouTube and see what this is about, see what people are talking about. But the reason why I caught my attention more important than the value of that is being shown everywhere around this time, it was more for me the familiarity to situations that were taking place through my life. I always look at things in the incremental value, always looking at the molecules of things. You know what I'm saying? That's just me personally. People used to say, you look too deep into stuff. That's how I've always been. You know what I'm saying? I'm always analyzing everything, which led me to be scientific in some aspect, what led me to be more analytical in some aspect, what led me to be or to gain more aspects of knowledge in that in some form. But it was more perplexing and complex to me when I would observe. I was raised in two different areas. So being exposed to one area and then being exposed to another area, it was a large gap. It was a gap that it just didn't speak to the value of just saying a culture of people amongst a whole large area. It was like it was a breaking for some reason, like a separation and a breaking that took the synapses of connection that we had between each other and kind of threw it at whack. So you had people that were similar to you or looked like you in some way, but were completely different, really like 100 miles away, just completely different, but you're 100 miles away. I think the universe seen this as a problem. And ultimately, because you have the access to raise your chrism, well, in their description, once a month, because you get the new seed and the whole process, things happen. How do you know the level of these things that are taking place? How do you know if they're taking place? And if we go look at our lives at different time, you can see when certain things are not happening in your life subsequently to the value of physical attributes. And you go through months times, just going through months times. You was a kid, you wasn't drinking alcohol, you wasn't, you know what I'm saying? You was just a kid and it's happy energy and things happened. You remember these things. You called them something else because you didn't know what they were, but you were able to do certain things at different times in your growth. Astronomically, to a high catered value, this is speaking to the chrism actually taking place, or the Christ rising in you actually taking place throughout your life. This process in itself is not known to certain creations that's under this sun. But in the same breath, it's not known or taught to the creations that it works with the best. This is just a slight to DNA. My understanding was that I remember being different in some aspects. I remember being lesser. And then I remember being able to access knowledge that I didn't even obtain from a book. I remember these things and these transitions. I remember going from this to that. I sit down and I think about it now of how I killed a lot of versions of myself. And I sit back and I wonder, like, what was that actually recreated? I even had someone tell me a while ago, they're like, yo, you like a chameleon. You can fit any environment. It's like you fit in every environment in some aspect. And I didn't see that, but you know what I'm saying? I guess someone else saw it. So, unbeknownst to me, just grabbing the reality of that, thinking that, well, if you had the actual focus of what you have now, how well would you have focused on the value of these things taking place when you wasn't in the mentality to be addicted by the physical attributes that control these mental forms? See, it gets deep like that for me. Like it's not more or less the value of the thing that takes place for me is more or less the okay, I understand that was taking place, but it was a conjunction in order for you to have a balance of negative and positive, or the contrast. This is the reason why you couldn't be aware of it, because why didn't anybody else know? And if they did, why didn't they practice it? You see what I'm saying? Like, the universe don't make mistakes. And I read a book a while ago with a friend of mine stating to the fact that the things you do in the past is subsequently the outcome of what it will be in your next life. You know what I'm saying? So to understand that value and some reality, it was a detriment. Somebody knew and people didn't practice it. You know what I'm saying? On both sides, the people who knew probably got removed because they wanted to practice it for other people, and then the people who knew that didn't want nobody to know probably tried to keep it for themselves. So then what did that birth? It birthed a bunch of people who was able to do it but would never know until the end, because of the fight of the people who wanted to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can re-engineer these thoughts and see them in their rawest form. So that puts me in that perplexing. So it's like now it's more of a reason to fight for not being adapted by the system. So therefore you can keep your seed healthy to see if and what would happen if you could have did it more. See, because now it's like the elders didn't notice. They might get it when they like 80, 90, you know what I'm saying? But we get an opportunity to understand this now. So what would be the probability of children understanding this in their, you know what I'm saying, or younger people understanding this from their early 20s and into their early teens? And then so forth and on. You're practicing this with your children when they come out and they understand what's taking place. So then their focus, it starts from the birth now. So now they ain't never going to really run to the outside world of things. They're not going to really run to, you know, materialistic things to satisfy them or keep them calm or whatever. They're going to understand the microcosmic orbit. They're going to understand the oneness in self. They're going to understand the rising of the chrism. They're going to understand the pineal gland. They're going to understand the pituitary gland. They're going to understand what happens with the oil and all this process and the fused bone. They're going to understand all this. They're going to know it. So there won't be a need at that young age to focus on outside worldly things. You know what I'm saying? Like, we adapt the value to concentrate the children into silence. So they will give us sugar. You know what I'm saying? They will give us things to occupy us other than the focus on the natural order of things. Now, what if they knew that? They would be farther along because they would have time to do it, but there would be a gift for them to give it to us because they would know what they're dealing with. So it'll be more of a conjunction to say, I would love to see them start this earlier. You see what I'm saying? Because the value of what it's going to do. Who's going to give you more value in life than the divine? Who's going to give you the better value out of the circumstances of your system and your characteristics better than the divine? So this is what I mean by having processes that were erased from the circumstance of being natural people and then put into the system of things, not knowing what that would be if you was able to grow in that right. So to me, the ideal of the extraordinary value of the Jacob's ladder, I think it is still new to people who can't actually transcend that understanding. You know what I'm saying? Or when they did for the first time, or if somebody did in the first time, it was so grandeur, it was labeled as, had to be labeled to them as something perplexing or something high value, when in fact, this is the thing that moves the cultures ahead, period. It's what allows you to speak. You know what I'm saying? It's how you spoke your first words. You know what I'm saying? You laid down for 9 months in a stomach. You know what I mean? So that happened 9 times. If your parents didn't put nothing in your body, and then you came out and you was born, you know what I'm saying? Then you laid that whole year just drinking milk. You grew. Your body got bigger. It just was happening. It just kept happening each month. This was the change. And we saw faster growth in the youth because they wasn't so adapt to the world. This is the whole probability of the falsified ideal of what the Jacob's ladder is. You know what I'm saying? Or the chrism rising. I think it's falsified because it's all the time. It's all the time. It's from your start to your finish. I think what happens is you get to a certain point in your life where the world or the system of things start to interfere with that process in itself. And that process in itself can no longer serve you the way it's supposed to. So ultimately, you know what I mean, you have to rediscover this. Well, how you rediscover something you never knew in the first place, but it always served you. I think that's where we at with it. You know what I mean? But I ain't gonna hold you. Naga.